China is abandoning Russia. Recently, China's EU envoy Fu Kong at the Europe-China Business Summit, responding to a question about Ukraine reclaiming territory, he publicly said, "I don't see why not," and that we respect the territorial integrity of all countries, so when China established relations with the former Soviet Union, that's what we agreed, implying a return to 1991 borders. This follows a statement he made to the New York Times back in April that Beijing did not recognize Moscow's efforts to annex Ukrainian territories, including Crimea and the Donbass. Although we shouldn't merely take the word of one potentially rogue diplomat at face value, it does follow some longer-term trends that demonstrate the precarious relationship between the two powers. I believe this is best demonstrated by Russia's 10-year-long efforts to build the second Power of Siberia pipeline to China. Now, this pipeline, first proposed in 2013, seems like a no-brainer. Coming after the original pipeline that draws gas from the east of Siberia, this second one would allow Russia to diversify their gas exports from their western reserves, which traditionally supplied Europe. And it's also the simplest plan for China to bypass one of their largest geopolitical weaknesses, being the easily blockaded Strait of Malacca, where most of their energy imports pass through. Furthermore, transporting gas through a pipe is 5 times cheaper than shipping it. China can also start moving away from coal power generation, which would massively help air quality and moderately reduce their carbon output and generally just improve their energy security. I mean, that sounds great, particularly when it was demonstrated that this was a huge weakness of theirs when they decided to sanction Australian coal in 2020, leading to numerous blackouts which greatly hurt their manufacturing industries. So the question is, where is it? Well, the current leader of China assured Putin that it would happen when he first came into power. However, nothing happened for years until right before the Beijing Winter Olympics in 2022, where the two countries signed a 25-year energy agreement, which was mainly about this pipeline, and announced to the world that they were allegedly closer than allies. However, it turns out it was only a preliminary framework that was agreed upon during the meeting, and it would need the go-ahead by both sides for the construction to start. And then the war happened, and much to Putin's dismay, Nord Stream was cut off, and thus this pipeline became even more critical. Hence, during Xi's visit to Moscow earlier this year, on the agenda wasn't only for China to publicly support Russia, send computer chips and weapons, but also the signing of this bilateral agreement to build the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline. Finally, after the meeting, Putin announced to his people and to the world that the construction of the pipeline was basically a done deal. It was the future of both countries, and that Europe cutting off the gas was now a non-issue. However, we now know that Xi basically failed to appease pretty much all of Putin's demands, didn't repeat any of Putin's statements on Chinese media, leaving him visibly frustrated. And then on May 24, Russia tried again when they sent their prime minister to Beijing with the main task of getting this pipeline finally built. Unfortunately, nothing was agreed upon yet again. And to make it worse for Russia to really twist the knife in the recent Central Asia summit, you remember the one where Putin conspicuously didn't make an appearance, China signed the Deep Pipeline Agreement with Turkmenistan, supposedly one of Russia's closest allies, and this was all agreed upon within days. Forget about NATO's expansion. This move right into Russia's historical sphere of influence is one of the most provocative moves I've seen in recent memory, a seismic geostrategic alignment, and yet Russia was too weak to respond. I think this really demonstrates why China has been dragging their feet on the ground on the topic of the second Power of Siberia pipeline for over a decade. Exacerbated by Russia's lackluster performance in the war and now the coup attempt, they sense weakness. They sense an opportunity to replace Russia as the dominant player in Russia's own backyard. If the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline was to be built, China would depend on Russia for more than half the gas supply, putting them in a very similar situation Europe was in not long ago. Russia could have simply forced China's hand in any international issue by simply threatening to cut off their gas, which would destroy their manufacturing industry, put them in an inflationary spiral, cause public discontent in general, and so on. It's clear that China wants and needs gas, but they simply don't trust Russia enough to give them this much power in return for it. Furthermore, it's not just Turkmenistan. China is consolidating their political, economic, and military ties in the other former Soviet republics as well, most notably Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. And remember the jaw-dropping moment when Iran and Saudi Arabia shook hands a few months ago? Once again, this was China replacing Russia as the dominant BRICS power in the area because of Russian weakness, providing China an opportunity to assert its newfound confidence in the Gulf. I'll leave you on one last thought. At the height of Prigozhin's coup, when the Wagner soldiers were seemingly hours away from Moscow, which friends did Putin call for help in his hour of need? He called the leaders of Belarus, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan, not China. I think that says it all. Thanks for watching.